President Trump says Iran has agreed to not have nuclear weapons, but that they could still change their mind. He appeared on the New York Post's Pod Force One with Miranda Devine. The interview was recorded yesterday and aired this morning. And during that conversation, the president also said Iran's Ayatollah has been involved in negotiations with the United States.
Regardless of how well we're doing, we can't let them have a nuclear weapon. And they've already agreed they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Have they?
Oh, yeah, they've agreed to that. I mean, now they can change their mind, but that was one of the things they had to agree. They've agreed to that. That was the big thing.
There have been new strikes from both sides, and commercial flights were disrupted in Kuwait after an Iranian missile and drone attack hit the country's airport, killing one person and wounding others. Let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata from Tel Aviv. What more do we know about these strikes, Charlie?
Yeah, so, hey, Lindsay, what we've seen is the most serious escalation between the United States and Iran and U.S. allies. Important to point that out, U.S. allies, since the ceasefire went into place in early April. Because what we saw was three ballistic missiles that were sent toward Kuwait. They either were broken up or were intercepted before they reached their targets. Another two in Kuwait, three toward Bahrain. But you'll see massive destruction from drone strikes hitting the airport at Kuwait. So there was one person killed, as you said, but more than 60 people were injured and a tremendous amount of damage there. So this wasn't aimed toward a U.S. military facility there, but toward Kuwait and the Kuwait airport itself. And Kuwait said they reserve the right to retaliate if they choose to do so. So what we've seen here is an escalation much higher than we've seen since the ceasefire went into place. And it doesn't just affect what's happening between the United States and Iran, but what's happening with U.S. allies and Iran. Because importantly, how this all began was the United States they fired a Hellfire missile at an oil tanker. It was an empty oil tanker that was headed toward Karg Island. It was about to be refilled. The United States tried to stop it. The blockade is still in place along the Strait of Hormuz. Hit that engine room. It disabled it, didn't sink it. Then Iran retaliated in a big way. The United States then counterattacked, hitting positions along that Strait of Hormuz. So even as these talks are going on, these potential peace talks that President Trump referred to, from a military standpoint, we spoke to military officials just this afternoon. They are on high readiness, high alert. And as you have seen, we have seen in the past 24 hours, this attack and counterattack, not just between the United States and Iran, but between Iran and U.S. allies in this region.
And Charlie, as you've been explaining this morning, the relationship between the U.S. and its Gulf allies is a key component of this conflict because those Gulf allies are more in the crosshairs and are economically more impacted by the ongoing clash. So while the U.S. may have said Iran's military and navy has been destroyed, the war is over, it has been won, it doesn't seem to match the reality on the ground that you're laying out now.
Errol, it's really important to point out here, when we're talking about the MOU, the language says that the United States and its regional allies, we're here in Israel, obviously the most important regional ally for the United States, and Israel has come under attack before, but we're talking about more than a dozen regional allies, these Gulf states. We're talking about Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, all of these allies that are all part of that essential potential agreement, but it also includes Iran and its proxies. And then we have to talk about the conversation with Hezbollah, which has been fighting against Israel. So all of that is part of this agreement. So when we see the United States and Iran trading blows and Iran not targeting U.S. facilities, but targeting Kuwait, targeting Bahrain, and Bahraini interceptors were part of what took out those missiles that were headed there, you can see how complex this agreement is and why it affects everybody in this region, including Israel, because here they're just on a knife edge. It could go either way, and they know that. So even as these talks potentially go ahead, everybody here is just waiting for what happens if they fail.
Right. That is the reality on the ground. Charlie D'Agata in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Charlie. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now with more on this. Weijia, good morning. Great to see you again. We've been mentioning this morning that there's been somewhat of mixed messaging from the White House on what Iran has agreed to, if this is really over. And the president had an extensive, I guess, podcast interview yesterday that is posted today. What jumped out at you from what the president is now saying about all this?
Well, the president did talk about Iran and essentially said that he wants to make a deal. He continues to stress that that is his preference, but also threatens that if that does not happen, he'll have to do it, quote, the other way, which, of course, he has also said. But I do think one thing that stood out in terms of his thinking through negotiations, because the interviewer asked him about this mixed messaging, about how answers change, about whether that's actually part of the strategy to keep Iran on its toes. And the president said, no, it's just a fact that things change rapidly and things change on the ground. Things, shift during talks, and that is why there is what appears to be mixed messaging. As you mentioned, this was a really extensive podcast. They talked about several things. And one other thing that stood out was his response to the DOJ's claim that they were going to abandon the efforts to establish this $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. He was asked whether, they are dropping this, and he said no, but a court ruling has caused them to have to stop pursuing it, which is not exactly the case. The court ruling said that the fund had to have a temporary block until next month. But it was Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, who testified under oath yesterday to say that they were not going to pursue this even after the court ruling date. So there is a little bit of confusion there, too, about what the president's intentions are with regard to this very controversial fund.
All right, Weijia, let's also talk about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. This has been rescheduled for July. You are the president of the Correspondents Association. You were widely heralded for your calm and collected composure when this all went down, when the shooting went down outside the initial event. Talk to us about this decision and what you have planned.
So this was a decision that was not made easily. The board and I, along with input from our members, came to the realization that we couldn't do nothing to continue our annual celebration of the First Amendment. It is important to acknowledge our award winners, our scholars who missed out on the chance to be recognized, and of course, to really toast all of the freedoms that are in the fabric of our democracy preserved in the First Amendment. And perhaps if this wasn't this year, it would be easier to just wait another full year before the dinner. But because we are talking so much about America 250 and what this country stands for, it is important to show that a free press is not going to be intimidated into silence. So we will have another dinner at the end of July, and the president has said he will attend, which is also a sign that he says of strength and fortitude that the association is forging forward. And I certainly feel that way about the White House press corps, as we saw that night. And we continue to see everybody continue to move forward and demonstrate courage, even during that very frightening night.
Weijia, can you tell us anything about how different the event might look or what changes will be made?
Well, there will be a lot of security enhancements. That was top of mind as we planned. It will be at a different venue, and it will be at a smaller scale. So those are just some of the differences. But, in the end, I think what's important is that everyone has the chance to come together, to stand in solidarity, and to, appreciate our freedoms.
Do you think these changes will be permanent for this event, or is it too early to tell?
It is way too early to tell, and that won't be my decision to make because my presidency will be over after this dinner, and I have full faith in the future leadership that they will make the right call.
Yes, well, Weijia, you and the association doing incredible work under really impossible circumstances, making sure the focus is on the students, the scholarships, and the First Amendment. Weijia Jiang, we appreciate all of your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.